Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, August the 4th, 2025. Today is Barack Obama's birthday. He is 64 years old. So, happy birthday, Barack Obama. And because it's his birthday, I thought it would be a good idea to look at his horoscope. But before I look at Barack Obama, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, August the 4th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. And Monday, August the 4th, not a day when a huge amount is going on. And so, we've got the moon in Sagittarius, we've got making a trine to the sun. You might say, well, that is pretty much it. Moon trine sun. Okay, the moon does start to make a square to Mars, but that square to Mars is not exact today. It's not exact until tomorrow. So with moon trine sun, the week kicks off on quite a fortunate note. It's always good to have the sun and the moon in making favourable aspects to each other. It's quite healthy. It's quite optimistic, particularly in fire signs. And so we might be of a view that things really are moving. And so how does that relate to the rest of the week? If you looked at my last video, I was quite negative about the week. Well, the week doesn't start off badly. I think the problems start to come in sort of Wednesday, from Wednesday onwards. I think sort of Monday and Tuesday, things aren't so bad. And so, we mustn't think that just because the week looks good, it starts on a fairly innocuous note. We shouldn't think that it's going to continue on this theme. But we might as well, make hay while the sun shines. And, I'm not convinced that a huge amount is going to be happening today, at least on a personal level. Of course, on an international and collective level, there's always stuff going on. And another aspect we have is Sun semisextile Jupiter. And I considered making Sun semisextile Jupiter my special topic for the day, but I decided not to. But I mean, as far as what it means, the Sun semisextile Jupiter can be excessive. Sun in Leo wants attention, wants to be larger than life, and it's semisextile Jupiter. So there is that challenge to bring Jupiter into conscious awareness, and we might want to do something excessive because we feel we have to. We might want to exaggerate. We might want to cause a fuss, and why not? Because it stirs things up. It's not enough just for the sun to be in Leo. Sun in Leo, might want some extra attention. So how do you do that? Well, the semisextile with Jupiter perhaps gives us some clues about how we we might want to do it. So that is the broad picture. There are some aspects starting to form that may be beginning to have an impact. Mars is 28 Virgo, so Mars is getting ready to change sign, and so you could say that Mars is starting to move towards an opposition of Saturn. Are we starting to feel that opposition to Saturn? I think we probably are. From a Vedic perspective, that Mars-Saturn opposition is already in force. But from a Western view, maybe a day or two we have to wait until Mars moves into Libra, which is going to happen. Pretty soon. So there might be a certain feeling of growing frustration as Mars gets closer to that opposition of Saturn, and confusion as well, because Mars is, additionally making an opposition to Neptune. So that's something that we very much need to be aware of. So that's the broad picture. short term, not a great deal necessarily going on. And from an Australian view, if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, then the moon is earlier in the sign. There's a moon in Sagittarius, so this is a representative of Australia and New Zealand. That trine between the moon and the sun is more powerful in Australia than it is in the Americas. In the Americas, that moon trine sun is still operational, but it's more about the beginning of the day. If you're in Australia, I think you will get the full force of that moon trine sun, and so perhaps if you are in East Asia or Australasia, then it might be a day when it can be quite harmonious, where things really are moving. They can move, and you can feel quite happy. And the moon is not just making a trine to the sun, but it's also making a trine to Mercury. And then there is the heliocentric view, and so here is today from a heliocentric point of view. And so I'm not saying that a huge amount is going on. We still have Mars making a opposition to Chiron. It's starting to fade, and maybe Mars opposition Chiron is a similar energy. I'm not saying it's an identical energy, but perhaps a similar energy to Sun semisextile Jupiter geocentric. So Sun semisextile Jupiter, some of us might want to take things further. We might not be happy with the way things are, and we might want to escalate, move things to the next level if we're not getting enough attention. And so likewise, Mars is an assertive planet, and opposition Chiron may sometimes feel that it just can't make an impact, so it has to try extra hard. But on a different note, there is a sextile between Venus and Jupiter, and this is a more gentle aspect. And the Venus-Jupiter sextile is reflected perhaps geocentrically in the fact that we have the growing influence of a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Now, that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is not exact until Monday of next week. So we've got another week before that Venus-Jupiter conjunction becomes exact geocentrically. I'm still trying to think about that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. I'm trying to think about it for myself, actually, because that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is at sort of 13 degrees Cancer. My IC is at 14 degrees Cancer. And of course, the United States has its sun at 13 Cancer. So I think that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is important. And the question is it good for the United States, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction? On paper, yes. But it could encourage the United States to take something too far. And when we think about the United States at the moment, we're thinking about Trump, who certainly his behaviour has been quite erratic recently. I mean, maybe there's a plan, as they always like to say now. Maybe it's Trump's 5D chess. Who is playing the 5D chess? Is it Putin or Trump? I mean, certainly people like to say that Putin is playing 5D, or is it 4D chess? But maybe Trump's doing it as well. So perhaps we shouldn't be too dismissive of Trump's antics. But Venus sextile Jupiter heliocentrically, it's a fortunate influence, and it mitigates other things, and it provides some basic sort of optimism, and we can think the best. It's good to be optimistic. It's a tough week, but we don't realize it's a tough week, and so maybe if we've got something to do, we should really take advantage of things. While things are going well, while we've got this geocentric moon trine sun, and because there's not a lot going on astrologically, at least on an individual level, then maybe we should take advantage of that by saying, well, there's no pressure. Perhaps we can do things which we won't be able to do, in a few days' time. There won't be the pressure. So that might be a way of using today's planetary energies. So that's the broad picture. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. And just a warning, there isn't much going on. I'm not convinced that there is a huge amount to say. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, August the 4th, 2025. Aries. Things are relatively straightforward today, I think. Things are moving. If you want something to happen, it can happen. And I don't think there's going to be a great deal of resistance. So if there's something, something you planned on doing, then probably it's just okay to go ahead. But the lack of resistance can sometimes be problematic. If something is too easy and there's no pressure, no questioning, then that might make you nervous. It's all very straightforward. But then you have the question, where are things going? And that might be something that's difficult for you to work out. So maybe Aries, it's just about just accepting things as they are, accepting your good fortune, and you are free, and you don't have to have a big fight about it. In fact, your ability to get on with people today is really going to be pretty good. You'll know what to do. You'll know how to present yourself. Even if your behavior isn't 100% perfect, it won't matter. And people will just accept you, and they will enjoy your company. And so overall, it's looking quite good. And just don't allow yourself to be distracted or burdened, because there's no reason to be burdened. Okay, there is a semisextile between Sun and Jupiter. Now, arguably, that semisextile between the Sun and Jupiter is the main aspect of the day. I mean, it's normally treated as a minor aspect, but because there's not much else going on, then we might say, well, that Sun semisextile Jupiter could take on a new significance, and it perhaps might be that there are things that you do enjoy doing, you like doing, and why not? And the question is, can you interest other people in what you're doing? For example, your family. Are you and your family 100% on the same wavelength? I think that you will be tolerated, and you can do what you like without your family raising concerns. But it would be nice if there was more support, and I think that might be the problem today. You feel that there's perhaps an ambivalence. You're allowed to do what you like, but there's no enthusiasm there, and that could make you rather uneasy. But don't worry about it. And as far as relationships are concerned, relationships can work today. As I've already said, you can get on with other people, even if you feel that your behavior isn't 100% perfect, and that includes the people close to you. You'll know what to do, you'll know what to say, and there won't be much self-consciousness about it. So you can be quite natural. And additionally, don't forget that Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, that conjunction between Venus and Jupiter is still a long way out. It's over 7 degrees. But if you take the view that a conjunction has an orb of 8 degrees, you can then say, well, it is operational, that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And It's in Cancer. It's in an angular house from an Aries perspective, and so Venus, that conjunction between Venus Jupiter might indicate that you should be looking at the people around you, and looking at what they're doing, and perhaps looking at how you can maybe encourage them, how they can encourage you. Not much happening today though, but it's going to start getting stronger over the course of a week. And when I look at this week, I mean, not from a specifically Aries perspective, but just in general, I do think that this week is going to be quite tough. There's all sorts of stuff going on. At least it's tough on paper. I don't know what the reality is. I mean, that is a problem with astrology. You get really excited about these sort of huge aspects. Mars going to Libra, opposition Saturn, full moon, Sun semi-square Mars. I can go on. It does on paper look like a tough week, and sometimes you get really worked up about it, and when it actually happens, well, in fact nothing happens. But if things do start getting difficult, then the Venus conjunct Jupiter could be a saving grace. It could be a constant theme. Perhaps someone is always there for you, or works both ways. You can be always there for another person. And so don't abandon anyone. Try to have good connections with as many different people as possible, because you never know who might be useful. And also, you never know who might need your help with this Venus conjunct Jupiter. But it does seem that someone is becoming more prominent, and is also becoming more lucky. And it could be a member of your family. I mean, the Venus Jupiter conjunction is in the sort of a domestic sector of your chart in Cancer. So that might indicate that through your family you can find good fortune, or at least there can be a feeling of sort of oneness over the next week, which is going to persist regardless of what else is going on. Taurus, possibly not a particularly busy day. I mean, there's nothing that really absolutely matters. And if you just want to do things your own way, at your own pace, then I don't think anyone's going to mind. And Taurus, you're going to be attracted to things which are familiar, that you've perhaps seen a million times before. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it should be disregarded. Don't take things for granted. That's true. And you've got to make some effort to support what's always been around you. But I think that is something that you very much can do. And so if today you don't really want to do much, or you feel that there's something quite private you want to get on with, then that's certainly an option. Though I think that many Taurians are going to feel that they would like to do something. There is some surplus energy that's sort of building up, and if you don't do anything, then this energy could get out of hand, and you could feel frustrated. And so it's probably a good idea to find a way of using your energy in a constructive way, and that might mean creating some new activity for yourself. Maybe a physical activity, something to exhaust yourself a bit. Okay, you don't want to kill yourself, and you've obviously got to make sure from a medical perspective, that all is in order. But I think that you do need something. You do need something to focus on today, or else you could find yourself getting quite frustrated, and that's not something we want, is it? And at the same time, you have to look at what other people are doing. As far as relationships are concerned, you are aware of a change, or a process of change. People had been fairly consistent, up to a point, but now you can see that someone is maybe about to change their mind, or is perhaps about to make a decision, or is maybe not going to be available anymore because they're on the verge of moving from one place to another. So it's important, Taurus, that you don't miss that chance. So if there's something that you want to communicate, then now might be the time to do it. And it's not just about communicating; it's perhaps something you want to share, something you've been meaning to say, or an interest of yours, but that you have wanted to talk about. And if you don't talk about it now, then it might not be so easy at a later stage. Someone who you thought was just completely available may not be there anymore. Though, Taurus, I think it's important that you are optimistic. Because this week, I did a video yesterday where I talked about the main aspects going on over the week, and I think there is a lot going on, and it's not always easy. We've got a full moon, we've got Mars opposition Saturn, we've got Mars moving into Libra, we've got Sun semi-square Mars. It could be difficult, and difficult, not specifically for you, but for everyone. And so you need to think about what can look after you, and you can look after yourself, because we know with this Venus conjunct Jupiter, that Venus conjunct Jupiter is getting stronger over the next week, and it becomes exact sort of next Monday. What's next Monday? I think it's the 11th. I think Monday's the 11th. Monday the 11th. You've got Venus conjunct Jupiter. Also, you've got Mercury going stationary direct, and so you think about it. Venus, your ruler, conjunct Jupiter. That is really very fortunate. And so I'm thinking, Taurus, that over the week, however difficult things are, there's always going to be something looking after you, and you're going to be lucky. And so perhaps now is the time to just be tuning into that luck as it develops. And luck can take many forms, and you shouldn't make assumptions. So you may, for example, decide to go somewhere, on the spur of the moment, and that's where your luck is. So if your current situation doesn't seem great, or you're feeling there aren't any or many opportunities, then a quick change of scene, could make all the difference. Gemini. At the moment, relationships appear to be of some importance. You feel that other people can't be avoided. That's especially the case if you're in East Asia or in Australasia. The moon is making a trine to Mercury in Australia and New Zealand. That moon trine Mercury, not as strong in the Americas, but it's still there to some extent. And so with the moon in Sagittarius, Mercury in Leo, then that does indicate that you do have sort of a basic capacity to get on with people in a sort of fairly easygoing way. And this chimes with what is important anyway, because while the moon is in Sagittarius, you are ready for other people. You kind of think that you can't entirely do everything your way, because you never know what other people might say. You might not know what they're going to demand next, and so you are on your guard. and you are aware of your responsibilities. But just because you're aware of these responsibilities doesn't necessarily mean that these responsibilities are going to really manifest fully. And so, don't close down options and alternatives just because you're trying too hard to please another person. You do have to think about yourself, and don't forget Uranus is in Gemini, and so with Uranus moving through Gemini, it is a time when Geminis need to be thinking about themselves and what makes them different, and so it's quite new for Geminis having Uranus in your sign. And because it all started on July, I think it was July the 7th, when Uranus moved into Gemini. It doesn't stay in Gemini forever. It does have a brief movement back into Taurus, at the end of the year and into next year. But by next year it will well and truly be in Gemini. And so this is a time to be thinking about yourself. And so, with the moon in Sagittarius, you don't want to get sort of completely obsessed about what other people are doing, worrying too much about what other people are doing, and you certainly don't want to get involved in sort of mindless gossip and speculation. That would be unnecessary. And one aspect we do have is a semisextile between the Sun and Jupiter, and this Sun semisextile Jupiter aspect could be excessive, or it could be obsessed. You're happy, you're minding your own business, and then you think about something, and then you're trying to incorporate something with this Sun semisextile Jupiter, and it may just keep occurring to you that money is something that you have to take into account. You don't really want to take money into account with this Sun semisextile Jupiter, but you have to. And so if money does come up for whatever reason, deal with it head on. Don't ignore the subject. And additionally, with Sun semisextile Jupiter, there is a chance here, through a bit of effort on your part, to find some financial good fortune, because especially as Venus and Jupiter together are making a conjunction, and this conjunction may not be exact for another week, but now this Venus and Jupiter are moving closer and closer together. So Venus Jupiter conjunction in Cancer, in a sign in your chart which is very, very financially orientated, it could be, regardless of whatever else is going on, that you see the path forward to making some kind of financial gain. And additionally, going back to this Sun semisextile Jupiter, it's possible also that you have to incorporate another person's view. And this goes back to the issue of relationships, and perhaps you're told something or you hear something which is not in accord with your current state of thinking. It's not what you wanted to hear. It could be about money, but if you make the effort to integrate it, then I think that we will be able to benefit. And another thing, Gemini, you are able at the moment to see possibilities, and you should allow yourself to be inspired. And by giving yourself variety, you can create the possibility of realization. You come across something new, or perhaps you talk to someone new, and then suddenly something comes together, and there can be a moment of realization where you realize that things aren't so bad, that there is now an ability to get past an existing obstacle, perhaps, and you just feel maybe a sense of relief. Something you thought was a problem needn't be a problem at all. And this sort of optimism can perhaps take you through the rest of a week. I mean, this rest of a week at times is going to be tense for everyone. I mean, it's not specifically a Gemini problem, and maybe you'll be picking up just picking up on other people's concerns, but your own inspiration and your ability to see through things and to realize that no problem, however bad it seems, is insoluble, and in fact the solution is right at hand, and you get it, and it all comes in that moment of inspiration. But you've got to put yourself in a position where inspiration can actually happen. Cancer. Moon is still in Sagittarius, and that means that the moon is still in mutual reception to Jupiter, and we could just leave it at that. I mean, the moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs. Moon is your ruler. Jupiter is in Cancer. Jupiter is a planet of good luck. Therefore, the day starts on a great note. The week starts on a great note. You're feeling happy. You're feeling comfortable. Nothing amazing is going to happen, and that's probably a good thing. Why would you want anything to happen? If you're feeling happy, if you're feeling at one with yourself, that's as far as it goes. And matters are further helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to the sun. So, the moon is your ruler. It's making a trine to the sun. That trine to the sun is, it's in fire signs. It makes you perhaps active in your own way. Not active as in involving other people in your actions, but you can be industrious, and you're quite inspired about it as well, because this sun moon trine is in fire signs, and you can get closer to the achievement of some of your short-term goals, and part of that comes through just good preparation, being well organized, and knowing what needs to be done. And that moon trine sun might well have a financial element to it. So if you want money, or you feel money is owed to you, or you feel that financially something is missing, perhaps that moon trine sun is going to help you out. And continuing on a financial theme, we also have Sun semisextile Jupiter. So the Sun is in Leo, and it's making a 30-degree aspect to Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is the planet of good fortune, in mutual reception to the moon, and the Sun making a semisextile to Jupiter. It says something about money, and it says perhaps that you can see how things should be financially, but it's slightly difficult. It's maybe something you just don't want to do, because it's too much like hard work, it's too much effort. But if you take advantage of that Sun semisextile Jupiter, you might be able to do something that you feel is perhaps slightly out of character, but you just do it. You just kind of know you have to do it. It's ever so slightly painful, but you do it and it works out. And so there are definitely measures you can take to make things easier for yourself. And I don't really want to say too much about today, because overall Cancer, things are looking good, and so I would have said, enjoy yourself. Don't feel pressurized, and just don't forget the financial side of things, because I think there might be financial opportunities. Again, not spectacular financial opportunities, but things you can create for yourself. Perhaps you start with a feeling of lack, that something isn't there, perhaps a sum of money isn't there, or something's not entirely as it should be, but you do something, you take the initiative, and I think in many cases you will be rewarded for taking the initiative. Leo. The sun is your ruler, and the sun is, in some respects, quite well placed because it's in Leo. We knew that, and additionally, the moon is making a trine to the sun, and so that is obviously a fortunate aspect, and it's quite harmonious. You do feel that you are at one with things, that things are flowing, and you can enjoy yourself in a quiet kind of way. I'm not saying that today is going to be especially dramatic, or at least it needn't be especially dramatic. You can just go about your daily business, be happy about it, be relatively successful, and also you can enjoy yourself. Though there are some challenges which might be optional. I mean, one thing we've got is a semisextile between the Sun and Jupiter. So obviously Sun is your ruler, but that semisextile to Jupiter, Sun and Jupiter are 30 degrees apart. And so Cancer and Leo are very different signs, and that Jupiter in Cancer for you is quite private, it's quite unconscious, and Jupiter is trying to get your attention. So it's something in your unconscious. It's kind of pulling at your sleeve, asking you to take notice of it, and it's telling you that you can really be lucky if you get things right, if you do things right. In its kind of good fortune, that Jupiter, especially as it's in Cancer and it's exalted in Cancer. But it's something you're still ignoring it. Perhaps because you're so set in your own ways, you've decided on a particular path for yourself, and you'd got things all planned out, and you didn't really want any distractions. But allow yourself to be distracted by the right kind of things. So if you have an unconscious impulse to do something, or to think about something, or just to explore it, it just may be that you've heard something. People talk a lot, and you don't want to explore it, or maybe something you come across when you're half asleep. Just you can't be bothered to look it up. You can't be bothered to work out what it's all about. But you should be bothered to work out what it's about, because it can help you. It can help you. Help you be successful. And success is not just about something you do in public. It's also about the background, the emotional background, what your emotions are trying to tell you. And if you feel that action might be required, action which you don't want to do it, but you see an opportunity, and if you want to change things very quickly, Leo, you can. So you might see a chance, and you would prefer to ignore it. It's always easier to ignore it. It can be a real pain to have to go out of your way. You might embarrass yourself, particularly if another person is involved. But there may just be that opportunity to just act quickly, and by taking advantage of that opportunity, then things can really happen, and you can start a whole sort of chain of events, which can really work in such a way that you ultimately will benefit. So, Leo, it's very important that you're not closed-minded. Just be open to anything, to be open to sort of every possibility, and if you can do that, you will be looked after, and things will move in a favourable direction. Virgo. Right now, Virgo, you probably want to just do things your way. You have ideas about the way things should be, and you're not seeking, huge amounts of variety and excitement. I mean, the world is sort of complicated enough. You could argue that why stir things up, but maybe there is a certain sort of obligation to do something. And the moon, the moon is in Sagittarius, and it is square the nodal axis. So when we think about the nodal axis and what the nodes actually mean, the nodes are a point of destiny or an axis of destiny. There is what you should be doing, in the future, and the past, what you're coming away from. And the moon in Sagittarius is highlighting this distinction, the idea that you have to move from perhaps the mistakes of the past to the opportunities and challenges of the future. And so there may be a moment in the day where you have a choice. You have a choice to do what you've always done, what you felt comfortable doing, or to apparently take a bit of a risk to move on to new territory. And this doesn't really involve anyone else. It is about you thinking things through, making decisions, deciding which plans are important. And so, be aware of that moment of choice. It's not something that you have to talk about. It's not something that needs to be advertised. And at the same time, as this is all happening, allow yourself to be sort of inspired. Allow yourself to suddenly be aware of a possibility which just didn't seem to exist before. And if you can be open-minded, then it may be liberating. And maybe you had assumed, Virgo, that something was absolutely impossible. It just could not be done. So there was no point in trying. I mean, you kind of knew that it was important. You might even know that it was essential to your destiny, but you still took the view, well, if destiny wants you to do something, then it would make it easy. If it's making it difficult, then that's destiny's problem. It's not my problem. But today, you can see an opportunity. You can see how what used to be difficult, what used to be impossible, can actually work. And it may just be about trying something again. And it may not be particularly spiritual or elevating. It just could be something technical. I mean, for example, if you had the opportunity to make your life better through a piece of technology, you might have just dropped it because the technology wasn't working for you. You couldn't get something to work. Yeah, it just malfunctioned. You couldn't read the instructions, and you were blaming it all on technology. But if you give it another go, have another go at making it work. It might be relating to your computer or your phone or some new piece of technology you brought into your immediate sphere. Give it another go, and you might be pleasantly surprised. So it's very important that you have a positive attitude. But if something has malfunctioned or has let you down in the past, doesn't mean to say that it's going to let you down in the future or indeed the present. And that is the way forward. So it is really important that you are open-minded, but you're aware of new possibilities. And as far as your social life is concerned, and how you treat other people and your attitude to other people, you are possibly quite cautious at the moment. You are not convinced that anyone can make a big difference. and you're inclined to treat what people say and do, with a pinch of salt, and you don't take their promises too seriously. But maybe you're just being too negative, and from an interpersonal perspective, it's quite possible that today, Virgo, someone's trying to make an impression on you. Someone's trying to get your attention. You may not be fully aware of it, but it may be worth your while. And I'm not necessarily talking about anything huge or super important, but just by listening to what other people are signaling, then this might be a situation that could really help. Maybe someone really has got something to offer. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're naive or that you just listen to anyone. Not everyone wishes you well. Some people are up to no good, but I'm talking probably about people you already know. I'm not talking about strangers asking for money or anything, or asking for personal information. I'm talking more about, I think, people you know, but people you have been ignoring or are inclined to ignore. But if you just give them a chance, you might discover that they can make your life better, and all you have to do is listen to them. Libra. Don't forget, Libra, that Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter are approximately 8 degrees apart, and so this aspect between Venus and Jupiter does not become exact, I think, for another week, until I think it's Monday, August the 11th. You've got the Venus-Jupiter conjunction becomes exact, but it's starting to form, and so Jupiter is the planet of good luck, and Venus is moving towards it. Now, I know I've already talked about this, but it's such a pleasant, fortunate aspect that you don't want to let it pass you by. Now, when you're dealing with a Venus-Jupiter conjunction like this, it's important that you're not complacent, and that you don't just assume that Venus and Jupiter is just going to do something wonderful for you and you don't have to do anything. Jupiter doesn't like that. I don't think Venus likes that either. So if you see opportunities, over the next week, then do give them a go. If you can just do anything to boost your luck, to put yourself in a position where something can happen, it's about sort of putting yourself in the game. And it's an analogy that I don't want you to follow through in its entirety, but the analogy would be that, well, you can't win lottery if you don't fill in a lottery ticket. Now, I'm not suggesting you do the lottery, by the way. All I'm saying is that if you want something good to happen, you've got to put yourself in a position where that good thing can happen. So, for example, let's say you're looking for a job. Of course, I'm not making any promises here, but if you are looking for a job and you make an application while Venus and Jupiter are making a conjunction, then perhaps you've got a better chance than average of getting that job, or perhaps there's something else you want that you perhaps have to apply for, or you have to put yourself in the right position to get it. And it could well relate to sort of business or career or this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, but not exclusively. It's just about you feeling good about yourself and getting the right breaks and the right opportunities. And yeah, it can happen. And but you mustn't assume that the universe is just going to give you everything on a silver plate, because I'm afraid it doesn't work like that. Now, sort of more immediately, today we have got a semisextile, actually, between the Sun and Jupiter. So that Sun semisextile Jupiter is possibly more of the same. So, talking about opportunities, opportunities can come in many different forms. And with the sun in Leo, at the moment, Libra, you're probably more sociable than usual. And being sociable is not just about having a good time with other people. You can benefit from other people. Other people are there for you. It perhaps is about making connections. And so, what seems to just be a merely social activity can have implications in other areas. For example, your career or some other thing you want. So I'm not saying that you should be completely transactional in your relationship, with other people, just entirely thinking about what they can give you. But, it might be a side benefit of socializing, being able to be put in contact with something that, that quite soon you're going to be able to use, in a constructive way. And additionally, aside from that Sun semisextile Jupiter, it's a bit challenging, by the way. You may have to be ever so slightly pushy with Sun sextile Jupiter. You see a connection and you have to push it, and you maybe have to ask for something ever so gently. And additionally, we have Moon trine the Sun. Moon trine the Sun, it's a great aspect. It's very smooth flowing. And this Moon trine Sun, particularly strong if you're in Australia and New Zealand, but I think if you're in the Americas, you're still going to get it to some extent. And so Moon trine Sun is about the flow of information, and it's also a very fortunate aspect from a social perspective. So that is another good reason to prioritize your social life. It's going to work for its own purposes. It's good to socialize. It makes you feel happy, makes you feel connected. But as I've already said, you can take things further, and success in one area of your life can feed into other areas. Scorpio, I think the week gets off to a fairly good start. You are quite motivated. You understand what's important, and you're probably ready for action. And that is a good thing, because Monday, Tuesday, the beginning of a week, it's fairly straightforward. Things only get difficult sort of later on. Mars, your ruler, is 28, 34 Virgo. It's getting ready to change sign. I think that sign change is going to be a significant event. And of course, Mars will be on the Aries point. It's already moving towards the Aries point. But while things are straightforward, as I think they are on Monday and Tuesday, do take advantage of it, while you have the opportunity. And so if you see that something needs to be done, then just go and do it. I don't think there'll be much resistance. There won't be so much questioning. And then sort of later on in the week, where perhaps things get more difficult, you'll have got the preparations out of the way. And so do take advantage of the fact that right now there isn't so much pressure. And so what is it that you feel is important? And ideally, Scorpio, you'll probably be focusing on material issues, maybe money, work, making sure that everything is done properly, and you will be quite effective about it, and no one's going to mind. So you can be down to earth and also maintain other people's confidence. In fact, people will like you. You'll give the impression of someone who knows what they're doing, is not going to rock the boat. And so if you want to sort of make new friends, make new contacts, I think you can. It's not that there's going to be much in the way of excitement, but it's all going to be really very straightforward. And don't neglect anyone. Everyone has their role, and you shouldn't assume that someone is of no value, because you just don't know. And one aspect we do have starting to form is a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. And this Venus-Jupiter conjunction will be exact in about a week. I think that's on Monday the 11th. And so with Venus making the conjunction to Jupiter, you're going to feel quite easy about yourself, but that sense of ease is going to be potentially boosted by others, and certain people can be lucky for you, and maybe because they can present you with new possibilities. You thought that things could only be done in one way, and then you might realize through another person's intervention that there are several ways in which things can be achieved, and that does matter. And so, Scorpio, it's important that you're not too single-minded. You might assume that there's only one. Yeah, you might assume there's only one way of doing something. The traditional way, the old way, whatever is most straightforward. But you're being told there is a different approach, and it might require some imagination, might require some effort, it might require some thinking, and you might have to take a small risk, but it's probably worth doing. So so be open to new possibilities and be open to alternative suggestions. I mean, you've got a lot sorted out right now, but you haven't got everything sorted out, and now might be a good time to sort of implement new strategies or to experiment with new strategies, because later on it's not going to be quite so easy. I mean, just because you say you're going to do something, it doesn't mean you committed yourself, but you just have this flexibility today, and I think perhaps tomorrow as well, which you might not have later in the week, because things are about to change. And don't forget, we've got a full moon coming up at the end of the week. Okay, we're not there yet, but that full moon is going to perhaps force you to do some serious thinking and make some decisions about which way you want to turn. Of course, that full moon takes place at the end of the week, very close to Mercury going stationary direct. So that's another reason why you can be flexible, because you're not committing yourself. And how can you possibly commit yourself? Because you don't have all the facts. And by the end of the week, things are going to be much clearer. Once you've got through the turbulence, and of course, being a Scorpio, you know that things are turbulence. I mean, turbulence is just a part of life, and so maybe it's possible that if things start to destabilize later in the week, you can take advantage of it, provided you don't take things too personally. I think that is going to be important. And finishing with relationships, it goes back to that conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. The Venus-Jupiter conjunction is relevant to relationships, and over the next week, really see what other people can offer, and don't write anyone off, and don't think that there's nothing more you can learn about another person, because I don't think that would be true. Sagittarius, moon still moving through your sign, and moon is making a trine to the sun, and it's always good to have moon trine sun, especially if you're a Sagittarius. And so the moon, remember, is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So that mutual reception of Jupiter, it's an important relationship, because Jupiter is your ruler, and it does bring you a load of luck, and that luck might not always be obvious, and you might be wondering, where does that luck come from? Does it come from the outside world? Is it other people presenting you with luck? But no, the luck comes from yourself. And so if you feel that nothing is going on, you can't see where the luck is, it's because you're looking in the wrong place. And if you really go into yourself, look at who you are, what you've been through, what you've got to offer, then you might feel yourself to be lucky. And once you feel yourself to be lucky, that's going to give you new confidence. And then sort of that feeds into the fact we've got Moon trine the Sun. So Moon trine Sun allows you to be just connected to everything, and most importantly, making the connections. Because once you make the connections, and that's something that Sagittarians should be good at, you make the connections, and then everything comes together. Now, possibly the main aspect today is a semisextile between the Sun and Jupiter. So the Sun and Jupiter are 30 degrees apart, exactly 30 degrees apart. And of course, Jupiter is your ruler. And so the challenge of the Sun semisextile Jupiter is to take something which you might not be too confident about. It seems complicated. It seems that if you were to make it part of your life, it might be just difficult to handle. And one reason it might be complicated is because you haven't fully given it the light of day. You've kept it to yourself. You could have been brooding. I mean, one doesn't normally associate Sagittarians with brooding, but you can brood, and we can all brood. But something that you haven't really utilized. Yeah, perhaps because you've been afraid of it. And the challenge is to bring it out into the open and to see what it can actually do. So the Sun semisextile Jupiter, creates a possibility from something that you're just ever so slightly afraid of, because you just don't know. You're afraid of the unknown. But once you actually start to put it into action, then you see things in a new light. It's not about something that's unknown. It's something you're entirely familiar with. But you're familiar with it, but it's also quite enlightening. And so Sagittarius, it really does matter that you make the most of everything, and don't be afraid to give something a go, to see where it leads you, because it may lead you in a direction that you hadn't expected, and it's a direction that could really work very well for you. And at the same time, you are going to be supported. You are not alone. And even though you might not always want to communicate, you can communicate. And if you make the effort to tell people what's on your mind and to discuss your ideas, then you're going to get some good feedback. So Sagittarius, if you handle today in the right way, then I do think that it looks pretty good. Capricorn, you are not necessarily in the mood for frantic action. I mean, why should you be? I mean, there are things going on out there which might appear complicated, and you're also aware that they could become more complicated. And you're being realistic, and you know that you can't look at things just on the surface and just assume everything's going to be fine, because it's not going to be fine. And that's not a statement to you, Capricorn. It's a statement to everyone that things aren't necessarily going to be fine. And if you look at what's happening this week, it is a difficult week. Maybe not Monday and Tuesday, but as you move, it's Wednesday and beyond, things get more and more complicated. And the question is, can you deal with it? I think, Capricorn, you probably can deal with it. You have a sort of a down-to-earth approach, and with that down-to-earth approach, you can, to a great extent, take things in, take things in your stride, and you also understand the nature of things, that you can't have sort of optimism going on forever, but where there's optimism, there's always pessimism. And so that's the way it is. Where there's a positive, there's a negative, and of course it works both ways. And so your realism is certainly useful, and so one can perhaps understand why at the beginning of a week many Capricorns might just feel that they just don't want to engage, or they certainly don't want to take risks. But what happens if you were to engage? What happens if you were to make an effort? Well, then, Capricorn, you might realize, okay, you might not realize because Capricorns can be quite modest, but you do have a certain charm and attractiveness that is quite strong at the moment. And people are going to be noticing you, certainly today. If you make the effort, and there's something almost quite seductive about you. Maybe it's the way you appear, maybe it's the things you say, that it carries weight, and people are going to listen, and they're certainly going to give you the time of day. So even if you don't feel like it. So maybe, Capricorn, there is a degree of obligation here. You would like to do nothing. You'd like to take a step back, but perhaps that's not the right approach. You need to think about what is happening. You need to talk about what's going on. And if you hear something, don't just listen. You have to respond, and you have to respond with your ideas, your opinions, and in many cases, with your criticism. And at the same time, you might want to start sort of gearing up for a confrontation. A confrontation that's, it's not about today, Monday, but you have to understand that Mars is in late Virgo, and Mars is about to move into Libra. And when Mars moves into Libra, it makes an opposition with Saturn. And that sort of happened later in the week. And so Mars opposition Saturn, it's a difficult aspect. And it can be about conflict. You perhaps having to deal with something you just don't want to deal with. And it is probably best that you do deal with it. And so that might be part of the way you see the beginning of a week. You see the beginning of a week, as preparation, and you're getting ready for something. You're getting ready to change gear. And, when Mars moves into Libra, it's not just about the fact that it's opposition Saturn. That Mars opposition Saturn, well, that Mars is asking you to take things further. It's asking you to, will be asking you to really push yourself hard to make an impact. And that's perhaps what the conflict is all about. You having to confront someone, or maybe just something, and be aware of a difference, that you and the world perhaps see things in different ways, and then be challenged by it, and find ways for you to be assertive and to get your views across. And you can actually use the tension all around you, which of this tension it's starting to build up, but I think Monday, Tuesday is okay. But when things do become difficult, it's not just about you being a passive observer. You need to be part of it. And because you can keep your cool, typical Capricorn, you can potentially take a difficult situation and you can turn it round and really use it to advance yourself and your own interests. Aquarius. There is not necessarily a huge amount that needs to be done. you're not forced to do anything, I don't think, today. And the moon is making a trine to the sun. Of course, the sun is in Leo, your opposite sign. So as far as your relations with other people are concerned, they should be fairly straightforward. Things should go to plan. And if you are with other people, whether it's sort of one-to-one or in a crowd or a group, then there will be a sort of a high level of harmony, and you can find common ground, and it's there, and there's no need to cause trouble. There's no need to try too hard, to be an individual. I mean, it's nice to be an individual, but you don't have to sort of get obsessed about it. And with the sun still moving through Leo, I mean, it's still in early Leo. Do give other people a chance, and see what they've got to offer. And if they want to do something or say something, even if it's quite dramatic, let them, and do find out where it leads. Because what's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can be happened is perhaps that you can be enlightened. You can see the situation, for what it actually is. But I don't think today is going to be very dramatic. Although Aquarius, you do have your own charms. I mean, you are noticed, and you don't have to worry about being ignored. And in fact, if you make a special effort to be noticed, to be charming and attractive, then you will succeed. And your presence, your presence is going to be very real. And so, if there's something you want to say or communicate, Aquarius, then it just shouldn't be a problem. The words will flow. You might not think they're flowing, but they are flowing, and people will listen. And the way you put your words together will be quite attractive. And so it's just a day when things do work for you. But again, we're not talking about anything dramatic, and because there's a lack of drama, that does give you, a high degree of freedom. So if you want to do something, you can just go and do it. And other people are certainly there. You always got to take into consideration other people, especially with the sun in Leo. And certain people have strong personalities. I mean, you have a strong personality as well, but it's probably going to be a meeting of equals. So don't think that anyone is going to overwhelm you. You can look after yourself, and you don't have to worry about any sort of huge conflict. At the moment, I mean, things are going to change. I mean, Mars is starting to move towards an opposition of Saturn. Saturn is your ruler. Now, later in the week, when Mars moves into Libra, then you might be thinking about how you and other people are different, and there may be some sort of real irritants out there, and perhaps you can see it on the horizon. You can see how the situation might develop over the next few days, and you might want to prepare yourself. But today I don't think there's any need for panic. Just to enjoy the moment, and over the next few days you can sort of shift your approach and just become ready for a world which will become more complicated. But it's nothing personal. I think the world's going to become more complicated for everyone later in the week. Pisces. Still, Pisces, you want to get noticed, and you should want to get noticed, because you're special, and you need to recognize that. And the moon in Sagittarius is making a trine to the sun, and this trine between the sun and the moon is going to make you pretty well organized, and you will know what matters. So really, you're hitting the week in the right way. You're dynamic. You know what you want, and you're ready for action. And additionally, you can deal with the challenge. And there is a challenge, and this challenge is represented by a semisextile between the Sun and Jupiter. So the Sun and Jupiter are 30 degrees apart, and Jupiter is, of course, your ruler. And I think we need to really think about what this semisextile means. So, Jupiter in Cancer, great place for Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler. This is a time, Pisces, when things can really work for you. And Jupiter stays in Cancer until June of next year. But at the moment, we've got Venus moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. And that conjunction is exact in about a week's time. And so that's really fortunate. There's so many things you can get together, and you can really tune into what makes you different, and you can do things which are of really very high creative value. But the semisextile with the Sun is indicating that you need a degree of belief in yourself. The Sun is in Leo. You could argue that the Sun in Leo is everything that Pisces is not. I mean, Sun is in a fire sign. It's a fiery energy. And additionally, it's in a fixed sign. Pisces likes to go sort of here, there, and everywhere, likes to go with the flow, all those sort of Pisces phrases, swimming with the tide, whatever. But the Sun in Leo does need some kind of certainty and some plan. And so the challenge is here to sort of take something that you're good at, that you can do really well, you can excel at, and merge it with that Sun in the Leo. It's Sun in Leo, giving yourself constancy, but also making yourself feel comfortable with what you're doing and confident. And I'm not going to say boastful, but you need to be confident enough to sort of talk up your own abilities and have sufficient confidence in something to make it a permanent part of the scenery. And that might be it. There's a danger that you play with things. You play with things which you're very good at, that should be an integral part of who you are, but you don't take them quite seriously enough. And because you don't take them seriously enough, you might lose them. You might lose your cutting edge. And so the challenge is to make something permanent, to actually say, this is important and I'm going to stick with it. And additionally, you're going to be proud of it. And that pride does matter. And because what you do when you're proud of something, you make the effort. You put in the work. You try to organize it because it matters, because it's important to you. So maybe the real challenge of the Sun semisextile Jupiter, and sorry to overuse this word challenge, is to take yourself seriously. And if you can do that, everything else should run very smoothly, and then you can start to take advantage of everything that's happening. Venus is, of course, moving towards that conjunction of Jupiter, and it's getting closer and closer over the next week. And regardless of whatever else is happening in the world, and I do think it's going to be a complicated week ahead, but regardless of all of this, that Venus conjunct Jupiter, these two benefics coming together, it's going to really help you feel a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment and even joy. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And what I want to do now is look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 33, which is retreat. So retreat indicates that we need to pull back. We're involved in something and it may have gone too far and it's time to call it a day. And there's absolutely no disgrace in that. An alternative view of this hexagram could be that we should stay as we are. We shouldn't feel that it's the time to make a stand or to show the world who we are, because we're not ready. We still need time. So that's an alternative view of retreat. So whichever way you look at it, we should be perhaps waiting. And if we're involved in something dangerous, or we've taken something too far, there's absolutely no dishonor in turning back. We've tried something and it just hasn't been necessarily for the best, and doesn't mean it's over. Perhaps we need to sort of regroup our forces, get our energy back, be ready to go back to something or to try something again, just at a later stage. And we have a moving line here. The second line moves, and that indicates maybe that as we retreat, other people will be retreating with us. So if we want to retreat from a social situation, we've had enough of this social situation, we want to leave, we might find that as we retreat, everyone else wants to retreat with us, which is kind of a bit contradictory. We wanted to be out of this situation, we wanted to be free of these people, but if everyone wants to leave at the same time, then from a social view we're still encumbered, and maybe that's just the way it is, and perhaps it's a sign that we are showing some leadership. And there is a different view of this, and retreat can be about restraint. What is holding us back, and what is preventing us from spreading our wings, from trying something new, going out into the world. And in that case, the restraint is entirely fortunate. If we feel that we're held back, then whatever is holding us back is something that wishes us well. It doesn't want us to get ourselves into trouble. So if we feel frustrated, that we would love to be doing things, there's so many things we want to do, but we can't do it, and that could be a problem, or might feel itself to be a problem, but it's not a problem at all. It's something fortunate. It's something that is looking after us. Whatever that restraint is, it might be ourselves, it might be our good sense, it could be someone else, someone we trust, someone whose better judgment we look up to. Now, second line moves, that does mean that we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is a hexagram 44, which is coming to meet. So we want to get out of the situation, 33, but we could find ourselves coming back into the situation. So the very thing that we're trying to retreat from, in the process of retreating, we come up to it again. And this hexagram 44 can be about a meeting with someone who it's not necessarily in our best interests, someone who is very keen to get on with us, is someone who is friendly and welcoming, but they could be bad news. And so retreat means retreat. And so if we retreat and then we retreat into the hands of someone else, then that could just be out of a frying pan into the fire. And so it's really important here that whatever we're doing, that we look after our own independence. It does matter. We really have to understand that other people are not necessarily our friends. I mean, they might be our friends in general, but at the moment they might not be. And the more independence we have, the better. So retreat needs to mean retreat. And yeah, if other people are retreating with us, well, yeah, they can. But at a certain stage, we should try to go our separate ways. And we need to be as autonomous as possible, but it's going to be hard work. And the I Ching is almost suggesting that despite our best efforts, we might still get caught up with other people and their problems and their needs, and it might not be something we want to do. And so perhaps we just have to be tough, and we maybe need to look after ourselves. And so now I want to quickly look at the horoscope of Barack Obama. I mean, I do look at Barack Obama's horoscope fairly often, and one might think that he's just a former president, drifting into the sunset. Well, he's not that old. He's just turned 64, and so he's got probably got many active years ahead of him, and he has political views. So I think it might be reasonable to think that he remains influential, and he is one of the most significant people in American public life. You might not like that to be the case, but it is the case. And so one thing I want to do in this chart, in this video, is just look at some of the stuff that's going on. And he has been in the news. If I've got it right, he's been associated with Russiagate. So Trump and his allies have been indicating that Russiagate was, all Barack Obama's idea. This idea that the 2016 election, that Russia was, behind it, was supporting Trump. I mean, of course, it's all nonsense, but of course, but yeah, at the same time, governments try to influence election results all the time. I mean, that's what governments do. I mean, remember the Brexit referendum in 2016. I mean, Barack Obama tried to pressurize the British people into voting to stay in the European Union. You were talking about in trade deals, Britain will have to go to the back of the queue. I think he made an effort to use the queue, being of course in America you'd say back of the line, I think. But he used that phrase, back of the queue, I think, if I remember rightly. So he was pressurizing Britain. So countries do this all the time. It's not especially unusual. So I don't kind of get why Russiagate is such a big deal. But apparently, well, at least according to Trump and his allies, Barack Obama was involved in it and perhaps should be prosecuted for it. I'm not giving any views on this at all. I'm just saying that Obama has remained significant. He's someone that people still talk about, and that is the question: Has Obama gone away? Is his influence real? And one way of trying to answer that question is to look at what's going on in his chart. So here is his chart, and the moment I set this chart up, inevitably I'm going to get loads of criticism because I've set this chart up for Honolulu. I don't really want to get into that argument. As far as I'm concerned, he was born in Honolulu. Does it really make a difference? Even if he was born in Mombasa, as I understand it, some people are going to disagree with me, but as I understand it, he would still be a born, and what do they call it? natural born American citizen by virtue of his mother. And you say, oh yeah, but he was born in a different country. He can't be president. Well, didn't George Romney try to get the Republican nomination in 1968? He came quite close for a time. People thought that he might make it. And Nixon in the Republican primaries, he regarded George Romney as his main rival. And so George Romney was, of course, father of Mitt Romney, and George Romney was born in Mexico, and no one was really questioning George Romney's entitlement to run for president. Anyway, I don't really want to get into that argument. Suffice it to say, I'm confident that Barack Obama was born in Honolulu, and so what is happening in Barack Obama's chart, right now, and that's really what I want to look at. And he has got his moon at 3 degrees Gemini, moon on the IC at 3 degrees Gemini, and so when you're talking about the IC, you might be talking about the family and domestic arrangements. And it does seem that him and his wife have not always been getting on very well. There have been rumours about splits and divorces. I haven't really been following the news on this, but I do know that when Trump's inauguration, and was it the funeral of Jimmy Carter? That Michelle Obama didn't turn up to that. Is that right? So she wasn't turning up, and that was very much noticed. And so he's just had Uranus on his IC. So Uranus was approaching his IC at 2854. His IC is at 2854 Taurus. So Uranus was conjunct his IC. So that could have been causing a degree of domestic turmoil. And now Uranus is pretty close to making the conjunction with his moon. Now, Uranus does go retrograde. In fact, Uranus goes direct on September the 6th, and it goes retrograde at 1 degree 27 Gemini. So it doesn't reach his moon. But because it goes retrograde, it goes back towards his IC. So on December the 4th of this year, Uranus will be on his IC. And February the 4th, Uranus goes direct. And then on April the 4th, it will be conjunct his IC. So for the next 6 months or so, or more than that, Uranus is going to be moving around his IC. And then on June of next year, he's going to have Uranus on his moon. So he's going to have Uranus on his moon, Uranus on his IC, Uranus on his moon, IC midpoint. So Uranus is going to be causing real problems for him. Now, I somehow doubt whether Obama is going to be arrested because of Russiagate. I just can't quite see that happening. But it may put the spotlight on his domestic environment, what's going on between him and his wife and his family, and maybe where he's living, because the IC is connected with the home. I mean, I kind of don't really know where he lives. I mean, I know he has a lot of houses, but he may be moving around more than usual, and where he thinks he's going to be is not necessarily where he is going to be. So there is quite a lot of inconstancy here. I don't think this is necessarily a very relaxing time for Barack Obama. Just looking at it from the perspective of Uranus on his IC, and this Russiagate stuff took place around the time of the new moon. So there was a new moon on, when was the new moon? The new moon was in July. It was at 2 degrees 8 minutes Leo on July the 24th. He has a Mercury true black moon Lilith conjunction at 2 degrees 20, 2 degrees 49 Leo. So this new moon was right on his Mercury, right on his true black moon, Lilith as well, and it was opposition his Jupiter. He does have Mercury opposition Jupiter. So, with this new moon, what did it do? Is he upset about the Russiagate stuff, or is it something else? With Obama and his Mercury conjunct the true black moon Lilith, I often wonder what he thinks about. Because we don't really know what any of us are thinking about. You don't know what I'm thinking about. It's always that mystery. And, one thinks Mercury, true black moon Lilith, the dark thoughts of Obama. It could be about Obama planning and scheming. And maybe that new moon is really going to be bringing that out into the open. So that's certainly a possibility. And indeed, the new moon is activating his Jupiter. So he's got Mercury opposition Jupiter in his chart. So Mercury opposition Jupiter, in his case, seems to be an aspect that he uses very well at times. So in the 2008 election campaign, he was able to be an effective orator. Mercury opposition Jupiter, it worked well for him. In the 2024 election campaign, when he was supporting Kamala Harris, his oratory did not work well for him. And what he was saying, him, for example, berating young black men for not giving Kamala Harris their support. I mean, that was quite a patronizing thing to do, and he said the wrong thing. So this may indicate that Mercury opposition Jupiter is an aspect that when you're on good form, when the stars are aligned, Mercury opposition Jupiter can work very well for you, but when the stars are not aligned, it can backfire. And I just do wonder, what he's thinking and what he's worrying about with that new moon on his Mercury black moon Lilith. On his Mercury black moon Lilith conjunction. And one thing about Uranus goes stationary direct at 27-28 Taurus on February the 4th. And so it will be going stationary direct right square his nodal. So Uranus will be right on his nodal axis. And so that could represent an upheaval or something he has to realize. The North Node, South Node is, where is he going? What is he supposed to be doing? He's got the North Node in the 7th. That's right. North Node in Leo in the 7th, conjunct Uranus. So that's what he's supposed to be doing. Uranus conjunct the North Node can really stir things up, can stir other people up, can stir the populace up. And that North Node is important, because if you look at the United States chart, the United States has its moon at 27 Aquarius, and the United States has got the moon exactly opposition true black moon Lilith. So the United States has got the moon at 27 Aquarius. So Obama has his South Node on the United States' moon, and his North Node on the United States' true black moon Lilith. So he's certainly linking into something in the United States. And so when Uranus is going to be square the United States' moon early next year, and it's also going to be square Barack Obama's nodal axis. So there's really something about Barack Obama and the United States and what is going on in the United States, and perhaps popular restlessness that might bring Barack Obama, into the fore. So that's certainly something we need to watch out for. Now, as far as Barack Obama's solar arc directions are concerned, there is a solar arc direction that we need to be aware of. And it's a solar arc direction that has been getting closer since the election. So here's Barack Obama's solar arc direction. Remember, he's 64, so we move everything 64 degrees. And so if we look at the aspect of relevance, so his solar arc directed midheaven has just gone into Aquarius. So which is the same as the secondary progress midheaven, is at 1 degree to Aquarius. And it is conjunct his Jupiter. So traditionally, if you think solar arc directed midheaven on your Jupiter, well, that should be good for career and your ambitions and everything he wants to do. So in terms of how he is looking at himself and his public life and what's going on politically, I think that with the midheaven conjunct Jupiter, as far as Barack Obama is concerned, he very much feels that he's still relevant. I'm really convinced about this, and that he has got a role to play. And of course, if you're a Democrat, your aim is to get rid of Trump and to make sure that presumably Vance is not elected in 2028. And so he's, I think, politically very active with that midheaven conjunct his Jupiter. So I think that is something that we have to be very, very aware of. So I just don't think he's gone away. Now, as far as his solar returns are concerned, so here is his solar return. I mean, it's his birthday. We need to look at his solar return. And, it's a relatively strong solar return because, it's sun rising. I set my solar returns. When I do solar returns, I like to choose the place of birth. Of course, some would disagree. Maybe some people would say I should be setting this solar return for Mombasa, but I think I should set it for Honolulu. And so sun on the ascendant, it's a strong sun, and it reinforces who he is. And Mercury is, you've got 15 degrees 43 Leo rising. Now that's the degree that Mercury went retrograde, because Mercury went retrograde at 15 something Leo. So you've got that degree rising, and also it's 135 degrees from the Aries point. So we could perhaps expect him to regard this year as being important. I mean, last year was quite important. If you look at it, last year's solar return, let me just show you this. So, I mean, this does raise the question: did last year's solar return really manifest? And so, last year's solar return, Barack Obama had an exact new moon at the time of his return. He had his solar return exactly on the new moon, and it was on his IC. So the question is, has this solar return worked, given what we know has happened to Barack Obama over the course of the last year? So what has happened to Barack Obama? The two events, there are domestic pressures, plus his legacy is under real threat because of Trump having won the 2024 election. In retrospect, what we know, I would have said that new moon on the IC is saying more about his domestic life. And certainly there are now real questions about his marriage to Michelle and whether it's going to last. And so that's what people are talking about in the news. So maybe it's working. And also he had Uranus exactly on the ascendant. So it probably has been a really difficult and shocking year for Barack Obama, this last year that's come about. I mean, he's still there. I mean, nothing bad has happened to him. He's still alive and kicking, and I think as politically, he's still a very strong character, someone who is making an effort to shape America's future politics. So yeah, he hasn't gone away. And then you move to this year's solar return, and again, the sun is not on the IC, but it's now on the ascendant. So he is, I think, thinking about his role and what that role might be. And I want to finish by looking at Barack Obama's primary directions. I mean, this is sort of more of an educational exercise. And so, primary directions is not a technique that is widely used. Primary directions used to be the main Western predictive technique, certainly up until the end of the 19th century or beginning of the 20th century. I mean, I think sort of before Alan Leo. I mean, Alan Leo was a British astrologer who popularized astrology in the early 20th century, and you could argue he dumbed it down to some extent. But primary directions are basically saying that every degree that the Earth moves, after you were born, represents 1 year. So for Barack Obama, you would, if he was born at 7:24 p.m., then you wanted to move his chart, you would move it, so 1 degree equals 1 year. So he's 64. So that means you would move the Earth 64 years, and you would look at what the planets are doing in relation to the horizon. So if you move the Earth 1 degree every 64 years, and then you look at roughly what the positions of the planets were at the 64 degrees later, it would be at 11:40 p.m. that night. So he was born at 7:24 p.m. on August the 4th. So if we move the Earth 64 degrees, we come to 11:40, and we are looking at aspects in a very strange way, because we're not looking at aspects on the zodiac. We're looking at aspects relative to the horizon and relative to the Placidus house cusps. So if you have a look at this chart, you'll notice that Neptune is on the descendant and the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is on the midheaven. So let's go back to Barack Obama's horoscope. So he was born with Neptune in Scorpio. So Neptune was now setting, and so as the Earth turned, Neptune would move down towards the descendant, and as the Earth turned around 64 degrees, Neptune would get exactly to the descendant. And likewise with Jupiter-Saturn, he has his Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So Jupiter-Saturn was in the 12th house, but it was rising towards the midheaven, and so at around sort of 11:40, just over 4 hours after he was born, Jupiter and Saturn were close to the midheaven, and of course that corresponds to approximately 64 degrees. So we can certainly talk about aspects to his midheaven. So going back to the positions of the planets for just over 4 hours after he was born, we see that Saturn has just crossed his midheaven, and Jupiter is just about to cross his midheaven. So if we use primary directions using a basic Ptolemy approach, there are different methods of using primary directions. So in April 2022, Saturn was on his midheaven using primary directions. In February 2028, Jupiter was on his midheaven. So Jupiter hasn't quite got to his midheaven. So by primary direction, he's just had Saturn on his midheaven. He's about to have Jupiter on his midheaven. And so I've just shown you but by solar arc direction, his progressed midheaven is on his Jupiter. So that's happening now. But by primaries, that doesn't happen for, another 3 years. And that does indicate to me that Obama absolutely has not forgotten about his career, his ambitions. And he's still very much in the game. And on in March 2025, we had the halfway point. It was halfway between Saturn being on the midheaven and Jupiter on the midheaven. So of March of this year, Jupiter and Saturn were on either side of a midheaven. Now, there is a phrase for this in traditional astrology. They were in rapt parallel. So rapt, it comes from the Latin word to seize. So Jupiter and Saturn were sort of minding their own business, and they were kind of seized into prominence by the fact that they were exactly either side the midheaven. So that was in March. So what was happening around March? And let's not be too exact about it. I think you can allow a couple of months either side. It was, of course, shortly after Trump became president or got elected, and so I think that was the real hit for Obama. I think it was quite devastating for him, and with Jupiter and Saturn being wrapped parallel on his midheaven. I mean, he was born at the time of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. He's very much linked with changing cycles. That's very much him. And so now, with this Jupiter-Saturn wrapped parallel, he sees his legacy is under real threat. And so now we're going to have Jupiter moving closer and closer to the midheaven. So yeah, I mean, Obama is absolutely not going away. And additionally, he's got other things to worry about in 2026. The end of 2026, he has got by primary direction, Saturn is going to be hitting his sun. So you can see how Saturn has just crossed the midheaven and just gone into the 9th house. So if we look at his natal chart, he has got the sun just short of the descendant. So you can see that there are three houses apart. So if we look at the aspect, not by the degrees, but by houses, Saturn is now 3 houses apart from the sun, and 3 houses is a quarter of a circle, which is 90 degrees, so hence the square. So that is a little complicated, but this was the method of the method of prediction that people used, historically, up until the end of the 19th century. And one other aspect we've got is that, we've had sort of quite recently, is that you can see that Neptune has moved, is around his descendant. I think that had already happened. I think the Neptune conjunct his descendant was in June 2022. So it's already happened, but maybe that Neptune on the descendant just is saying something about his relationship with his wife, more evidence that things are not particularly easy, and perhaps there have been problems for a couple of years. And when you're looking at primaries, I'm inclined not to use absolute exactitude. A primary just gives you a general idea about when an event is going to happen. And then you might want to look at some other technique, like a transit or a secondary direction or a profection, to get a trigger to sort of make it more accurate. So I'm sorry to inflict primaries on you, but I think it's just important to be aware of them, especially as they were such an important technique in traditional astrology. And one other thing about the primaries is that I've just said that Mars and Saturn were making a rapt parallel across the midheaven. In fact, Venus and the North Node were also making a rapt parallel pretty much at the same time. So he had the Venus North Node rapt parallel on his IC at the same time as his Jupiter Saturn rapt parallel on his midheaven. And Venus Node, you might see that as relationship issues. So I think there's some evidence that these rapt parallels are working. And of course, we're talking about midpoints here, and I do talk about midpoints a lot. But so midpoints are not just a technique, but were developed by Alfred Witter at the beginning of the 20th century. They have been around for quite a long time, and they certainly do have a historic pedigree. So Now, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.